Hello, everybody. This is a very special time in our press club in Munich. We are the International Press Club, and so we have an international guest. I'm very proud to greet Mrs. Carmela Shamir. She's General Consul of Israel in southern Germany, in Bavaria. Have a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Fine. We are proud of that. Beneath my friend Dr. Ralf Schneider. He is president and chairman of the International Association of Journalists. Ralf, I greet you.
Thank you very much for the invitation for our first event together. It's a great pleasure, and it's the first time we do it together.
It's the first time for me also.
Fine. Multi-premiere. We have several questions, and I have the honor to give Ralf the first question, please.
Yes, perhaps some few words in front of my question, because we are the European journalists, yes, so there are other associations, international, and as I prepared my speech today, I looked at the relationship between Israel and Europe. And that's very interesting if you go also in the history. Yes, it was because you are in the middle of enemies. So Israel all the time was very orientated to Europe. But this love wasn't always given again. And so it's, I think it's very interesting also to have a look on the relationship, especially between Europe and Israel. Okay, but first of all, let's go to the Near East. There was the Abraham Treaty. And I think not everybody knows very much about this treaty, but it was quite important. And for us it's interesting, was this changing point, yes, for politics, or how do you see this treaty?
Thank you for the first question that is bringing a lot of optimism to the whole event. For me, it was very, very exciting, emotional even, to have this really paradigm shift in the Middle East. Israel is not only a burden, if I can say so, or an impediment to the stability in the Middle East, but became actually an island of stability. Now we can look at the in a broader view, and the main issue that everyone is talking about is joining forces against Iran. This is definitely a major problem, a strategic problem to the stability of the Middle East, but this is not the only reason behind these accords. And I should say in parentheses that that we had non-official contacts with the Gulf countries, with Morocco, obviously with Egypt and Jordan we have a peace agreement for so many years. But the thing is that the countries realize that Israel can bring not only security and stability, but also advantages in the way that all the countries in the Middle East are actually fighting global challenges, be it the climate change, where we have countries that are becoming drier and drier and have to worry about food security, but also these countries that are based now on energy supply, on oil and gas, are looking at it not only to the long run, and they know that they have to diversify their economies. And what Israel can bring is the know-how of innovation and the way to diversify economies, build them on a few more stable pillars. And I think it's a realization of all countries. And also there is, I think, a more personal dimension. Just a few months ago we had the Negev Summit, a very symbolic event where all the leaders, 5 leaders, met at the place where Ben-Gurion had a vision for the Negev, for making the Negev, the south of Israel, a green place. And they actually met there overlooking a beautiful valley and sitting next to the grave of Ben-Gurion, very symbolic as he is one of the founding fathers of the State of Israel. So there is a lot of symbolism, meaning the recognition that Israel is, as I said, a corner of stability or an island of stability in the Middle East. We are here to stay, and we are accepted now by neighbors.
But we have to fulfill this treaty with life. Sorry. What will be the next steps? What do you think? What the signers have to do now?
Well, actually, we have signed a large number of agreements that establish economic ties, trade ties, investments. We have a great number of tourists, mainly Israeli tourists, that are going and visiting. Dubai has become really the main tourist destinations for Israelis. So there is a lot also exchanged between people to people, which I think is one of the most important challenges. A lot of academic exchange, cultural exchange. So one of the things that we are doing is, beyond this intimate and more symbolic meeting of the leaders in the Negev, there is also a lot of activity behind the scenes, establishing concrete projects, concrete relations, making possible meetings between businessmen, between researchers in the academia. So we are building slowly a more stable foundation, going beyond the symbolic gesture and very intimate relations actually between the leaders.
Do you think also Europe can play a role in this treaty?
Absolutely.
Or Germany?
Absolutely. European countries obviously are very supportive of this development. It serves the stability of the Middle East, certainly serves the stability of Europe, and there are many European countries that want to be part of these positive development, want to join these projects, want to invest in these projects. We get a lot of not only official support, but also actual contacts and attempts or wishes to get involved in this cooperation.
Well,
a common alliance in Middle East against climate problems and according the helps of European countries, a very, very interesting project.
Absolutely.
With Ukraine and with Russia, Israel has very special relations. What are that relations, and are there trouble now? Yes.
Well, obviously there is trouble. There's a war going on in Ukraine, a war that is unnecessary, that is causing a lot of pain and trouble to the Ukrainian people, first and foremost, also to the Russian people, but first and foremost to the Ukrainian people, and is actually shaking, destabilizing the global situation in terms of energy supplies, in terms of fighting all sorts of challenges that we are all facing. And I think definitely Europe is recognizing it. Europe is mainly the repercussions are affecting first and foremost Europe. So we have said very openly that we condemn this war, that we would like to see the war ending. Actually, Israel was involved at the beginning in the attempts to mitigate between Ukraine and Russia. We have interests in both countries. We have Jewish communities in both countries. We have trade relations with both countries. We have supply of food to Israel, of raw materials to Israel. So definitely affecting us as it affects the rest of the world. We are respecting the international sanctions, and we are part of the global efforts, and certainly European efforts, American efforts to end the war. We have to take into consideration, though, that Russia is at our border now, present in Syria, that we have strategic cooperation with Russia in this field, or I should say, I wouldn't say cooperation, but I would say more accurately certain understandings. And it's important for us to maintain these understandings for the security and safety of Israel and its citizens. On the other hand, we were very much involved in humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainian people, deliveries of food supplies, building a field hospital there for a few months. It operated, and it did assist several thousands of Ukrainian. We received a few thousands of Ukrainian immigrants to Israel, not only Jewish immigrants. So we find ourselves saddened by the developments as the rest of the world, the rest of Europe, and we're trying to be as helpful as we can in terms of humanitarian assistance, but also, as I said, trying to mitigate or help in any way to end the hostilities in this tragic war.
Thank you.
It's very interesting, this mitigation you speak about. Perhaps one information also for our colleagues. Mrs. Shamir has been in Kazakhstan, no? Uzbekistan.
Yes.
So it's also
Tajikistan also.
Yes. Sure. So she was quite near. Yes.
Because these countries are actually in a very long. I wouldn't say struggle, but there's a lot of tension between those countries for many years.
I come back to this because I think you have nearer look at this, and yes, nobody is a prophet, but what do you think? What could be a possibility to end this war? Perhaps you have another look, another point of view on this conflict as we Europeans. What do you think? As a politician also, what could be, because so much colleagues and people say there's no chance in the moment to end this war. How should that go? How could that go?
I wish I knew. I wish I can give you a more a visionary and optimistic answer. I'm afraid many tried and failed. I just hope that this war will end soon, and I've really nothing more positive to say. As long as it continues and we don't see even a ceasefire, and people are still suffering, so in such a painful way, we see even atrocities that are being conducted there. I wish I could say something positive, hopeful.
Yes, the experience with enemies, and that's not only to fight against, it's also something what happened in the mood of the people, yes, and that's long lasting, and that brings me to the next issue. your relationship to Iran. Yes, it's difficult. It's often near also violent struggle, and so how the relationship to Iran, how do you estimate it now?
First of all, I should remind us all that we had great relations with Iran until the Ayatollah's regime came to power. We had close relations, and I think still between the Israeli people and the Iranian people there is a wish to go back to normal. Unfortunately, the Iranians are less able or unable still to do it because of a very oppressive and cruel regime, and we see how they actually oppress their own people and preventing them from any basic demands like even water and food shortages that the regime didn't allow the population to express in a democratic way. I think Israel or Iran for Israel. Iran is not a problem only for Israel. Mm-hmm. Iran has long arms that it's sending all over the world and is creating a lot of instability and instigating terror.
Terrorism, yes.
Absolutely. And as far as we are concerned, I think I can say there are two very meaningful or major concerns to all of us. The first one is nuclear Iran. I think no one accepts a nuclear Iran. Everyone sees it as a threat to global security. The question is how we solve this threat. Israel and Europe and the US, we all agree that there's a threat that should be stopped. But I don't think we always agree on the way. In 2015, there was the agreement signed between the five states, plus Germany, Security Council states and permanent members, and Germany. And we had serious issues with this agreement. We thought it is not strong enough, we thought it is not long enough, and we thought it is dealing only with the issue of nuclear, whereas Iran has other means to instigate violence and threaten the security, as I said, not only of Israel. Another major issue is the ballistic missiles, the development of ballistic missiles by Iran, and these are missiles that have the capability of carrying nuclear bomb. And we know that they are spreading not only the ballistic missiles themselves, but also the know-how. And they are producing parts of this missiles in other countries, which is a major concern for us. And we expect the agreement to deal with this issue as well. The third issue is sending, as I said, terror arms all over and using proxies for these terror threats. So we have Hezbollah in Lebanon, we have the Houthis in Yemen, we have the Islamic Jihad as well as sponsored by Iran, and all these we think should be dealt in a more encompassing way, because you cannot ignore the other threats to the stability. And of course there is the issue of human rights in Iran that I think is being raised by all Western states that are meeting Iranian leaders. There's a lot of, in a way, hostages European hostages, American hostages that are being hostages. I mean people that are coming to be tourists or researchers or coming to visit families, and they are all taken hostage by the Iranian regime in an attempt to pressure the other countries. So we are at a stage that is very alarming. So far, the Iranians have enough enriched material to 60%, plus enough enriched material to 20%, and this combination is actually enough to produce one nuclear bomb. And we are calling the international community. This is the time to stop it, because we are very close to the point of no return. Mm-hmm. So definitely an alarming, the most important strategic threat that Israel has.
We had sanctions against Iran since years, over years. Are they useful? Are you satisfied with this? And it's very interesting because now we have also sanctions against Russia, and also there are doubts if that fits very good.
I think, well, while the sanctions were in place, it was very effective. We saw that the Iranian economy is shrinking, so there was less money to give to terrorism, to develop, to support the proxies of Iran. So definitely we saw a positive effect of the sanctions, and unfortunately they were not lifted, but no longer respected by Iran. And we see a change in their economic situation in the terms that unfortunately this funding that is getting back to the Iranian economy when some countries or organizations do not respect the sanctions anymore, this money does not necessarily go to the Iranian people, but rather to supporting terror, developing the nuclear system, developing the ballistic system. Mm-hmm. So it might be effective. Sanctions are effective, but only if they are respected. Mm-hmm.
Very clear. Ballistic missiles, nuclear dangerous bombs. The point of no return is very near. Mm-hmm. This is what I take with me. Yeah. So you have a long neighborhood to Palestine. Mm-hmm. I told it neighborhood. Years ago, you told the Israeli people, the Palestinian people, talked about a two states system. Mm-hmm. Two sovereign states with good neighborhood as a vision. Mm-hmm. Is this nowadays still a vision?
Yes, it is still a vision. As for my foreign minister, we have that is saying the two-state solution is still on the table. It was clear during the past years that it is very difficult to find a partner to the Israeli government, a partner that could deliver not only statements, but also deliver actions. So far we have seen terror attacks on Israel civilians. Just from the beginning of this year, we had 19 terror victims. The last 3 actually died in a very, very cruel way. So I think the Palestinian Authority should take responsibility on its actions and fight terrorism in a very clear way. Also by stopping instigation and inserting into the education system the hatred of Israel, the non-acceptance of Israel. And I think when both people start to talk again and not talk about how we cannot live together, how it is impossible, but start to think about what do we need to do in order for us to be able to live together. My government now is understanding that the most important thing is to improve the quality of life of the Palestinian population, and we are promoting now an economic peace, meaning allowing more and more Palestinians, although the threat still exists, allowing more and more Palestinians to enter Israel, to work in Israel, to improve their quality of life, to provide basic needs of their families, good education, good income. And we think that this is something that might assist and make the Palestinian population realize that they have a lot to gain from maintaining stability and peace with Israel. They have a lot to gain from stopping terrorism, and they have a lot to lose when terrorism continues. And I believe that most of the Palestinian population is very much interested, or they really want to promote peace with Israel, as most of the Israelis, but there are extremists on both sides, and there is the question of terror that must be solved, and the Palestinian leadership should work with its people to prevent or to stop this kind of reality that we have to live with.
So you told us your offers to Palestine increased that offers after Netanyahu gained them after Netanyahu, or started it with Netanyahu, this offering from chances?
It started many years ago, but it stopped every time we had a wave of terror. It stopped. The difference with this government is that there is more willingness to continue, although terrorism is continuing as well, or despite terror attacks, there is the determination to continue with this kind of openness to the Palestinian, assistance to the Palestinian Authority that is, I think, kept hostage by a leadership that is not brave enough to take the necessary decisions. And the situation within the Palestinian population or society is very complex. There is leadership that is not necessarily or not anymore representing most of its population. Mm-hmm. There are questions of competition between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority that are bringing both sides to take more and more extreme measures. And there's a lot of internal criticism on the leadership of the fact that they are not providing to their people what they expect, basic needs that every person is aspiring to. Again, proper providing for their families basic conditions like security, like education, like food.
I think the hate against Israel from the extremists in Palestine is a tool. It's like a tool to collect. Yes, their guys, and so and this tool, this hate against Israel, we also find in Europe. And do you think it's getting worse, or what's your impression? Not only in Palestine, but also looking at Germany, for example.
I think Germany, first and foremost, I should stress, is the most important ally of Israel in the world, second only to the US. So we see a lot of support from Germany to Israel in the deepest way, and I think it was Chancellor Merkel that says that the security of Israel is a raison d'etat of Germany, and we feel it, we appreciate it, and I think Germany is proving it in many ways, in strategic support, contributing to our security, economic exchange, very deep cultural exchange, academic exchange, even sport exchanges. So we see, as I said, this very deep support from the German government. I think there is a lot of very good exchange between Europe and Israel, trade-wise, people-to-people, research, innovation exchange. There is a lot of real support and real benefits to both sides on the ground. I think there is not always an agreement between Israel and Europe on basic on issues, sometimes like the Palestinian issue, sometimes like the way to solve the Iranian problem. But we appreciate countries that respect Israel's right to have a different opinion, different choices, and we respect countries that have this dialogue with us in a non-public way, what we call a megaphone diplomacy. If you have criticism or you want to exchange and you want to have influence on the reality, you should have a dialogue with us, not necessarily a public one, not in the media, not in the parliament, but come and talk to us, and we will explain our complicated situation. And I think more and more countries in Europe, especially after the war in Ukraine, realize that this utopic world that you thought you live in is not that utopic, and there are threats and there are ways that you have to take, means that you have to take to fight these threats. So I think gradually there will be more and more understanding of the challenges Israel is facing, and more openness to hear Israel's positions and, adopt different policies. But I think Israel is not the main issue that that European politicians should deal with. There are internal challenges that first and foremost European politicians should deal with. And I don't want to see, as we see in some countries, that it is becoming such a major issue, or it is occupying such a big space within the internal domestic politics.
Yes, I think you are quite right, because you are confronted with enemies, I told already, and there was a few understanding for that in Europe, for example. But now we are nearly in a similar situation. So we have war not far enough, yes, and perhaps we don't know how far the war will come to us. And so perhaps it's tragic, but perhaps we have a little more understanding of your situation, understanding of your situation. Oh yeah, question?
So, we still have 10 minutes to talk. We are very on point here in this club. Before we talk about Munich, this is Press Club of Munich, and Dr. Schneider is a guy here from our Munich country. Before we talk about Munich at least, I remember a project of your heart. It's the exchange, you told, the exchange of the youth between Bavaria, Germany and Israel. So how can we increase that kibbutz visit journeys? Is this a future, and how?
First of all, as I said, the relation between Israel and Germany are very strong now, and are based, let's say they are future looking, they are forward looking. And I think this is this day or period, this is our responsibility to make sure that this relationship, that this commitment between both countries continues. In the 70s, we had people, volunteers, not only from Germany, but from European countries coming to the kibbutz, to the kibbutzim, and helping them, collecting the oranges from the trees, helping older population, living the kibbutz life, and helping Israel to build itself. And people that I meet and tell me that they were in the kibbutz when they were very young, still remember this experience as something that actually that remained with them and influenced them until this day. What we try to do with this new kibbutz system, which I don't think not everyone might know it. It's a system that allows young German students, or right after young entrepreneurs, to come to Israel for a period of 3 to 6 months and do internship in mainly in startups companies, but also in other economic organizations. The idea behind it is allowing young people to work, helping young Germans to get acquainted with the Israeli society, with the Israeli ecosystem, and to work together so that there is an understanding of the way of thinking of each other, and we are very different from each other. This is good, this is bad, but there is a lot of potential because we are complementing each other in many ways. And if we take it to the new kibbutz, it's a project that is focusing mainly on startup, on economy. So this will be beneficial if we look ahead on economic cooperation between the countries. But what I would like to see is more and more of these exchanges, not only focused on economy, also on let's say, basic research, on other aspects of development, like sustainability, like developing new methods of exchanging, new methods of working in schools, like building smart cities, like providing to certain disadvantaged communities. And the idea behind it is that we don't only visit each other, we don't just send young people to visit families and to do a touristic trip of Israel, but we want young people, and vice versa, but we want young people to work together on projects, to create projects together. Only in this way people actually understand the way the others think. They understand how can they learn from each other, and they understand the benefit of thinking together on solutions. The challenges for both societies are the same, especially if we look forward in terms of dealing with the challenges of global challenges, challenges to our environment, challenges to the work market, challenges to how to integrate immigrants and people with disabilities, for instance. So the challenges are common. The question is from which direction we come with a solution. And the fact that we are bringing together young people both from Germany and Israel, and they think together on how to come up with the right solutions. Sometimes it needs some adaptation to the German society. Sometimes it needs to be adapted to the Israeli society. Israelis do not necessarily think of how to move from a great idea to to making it sustainable, to build it, to give it the very concrete shape and form. So we are good with, okay, we throw ideas to the air, but then, okay, what are the specific steps? What are the structures that we need to build? And I think Germany can provide this. And this is the benefit of this youth exchange. Exchange between young people in many forms and shapes on many topics. This will be the basis, or this will ensure that Israel-Germany relations remain as strong as they are now, and even stronger.
Regarding the youth, I think at the end of our discussion, one question should come, because we know to learn from the history give us possibilities to solve problems in the present. But World War II is far away, and now we think about the terrorist attack at the Olympic Games, 1972. It's also far away. So what can we do to strengthen remembering, and how should we do it together? What's your idea?
Well, first of all, this whole year we are commemorating, and we are Israel Consulate, or Israelis are not commemorating by themselves. We have very meaningful partnerships with the German government, with the Bavarian government, with the Munich municipality, and they understand the importance of commemoration and of enhancing this kind of exchange between young people that is making commemoration more meaningful. So we have a project that we are doing with the Jewish Museum, with the NS Documentation Center, and it's called 12 Months, 12 Names. And each month is dedicated to one victim, and the victim is commemorated in very different ways. Each partner has chosen a different way to commemorate. For instance, we had an installation on the America House in Munich. We had a screening on the wall of the Central Police station not far from where we are now. We had an exhibition done in Fürstenfeldbruck. So every partner has their own way of commemorating, and we are welcoming it. The most important thing, I think, many Germans are reluctant or feel uncomfortable to talk about commemorating. There is a lot of guilt and fear of maybe hurting our feelings, but we say we think that any way of any means of commemorating is the most important thing for us. You can choose your own voice, how to do it, but don't forget and express this. Another part that is two parts that are part of this year of commemoration is first of all a very impressive ceremony that is being organized by the Federal Ministry of the Interior and the government of Bavaria, and we will have a very I think emotional ceremony on the 5th of September in the presence of both Presidents Steinmeier and Herzog and the families of the survivors and some of the victims. So this will be held on the 5th of September with many guests invited in Fürstenfeldbruck, where this tragedy, disaster, massacre ended. And the last part that is very, which is our way to commemorate, is a bike tour going from the Olympic Park, where the whole tragedy happened, to Fürstenfeldbruck, where it ended. And we are going to we chose the way I think that these sportsmen, athletes would have wanted to be remembered as sportsmen. So this bike tour is allowing many citizens of Munich, many other German citizens to pay tribute and take part in this year of commemoration in a way that I think is very, very close to every German riding their bikes. Yes. And I invite everyone. We will start registering for this bike tour. We invite everyone who wants to participate to join us. We hope we'll have thousands of people coming together with us and paying respects and remembering what horrible thing happened here.
So let's bike together.
Let's bike together, absolutely.
Biking for remembering. Yes. Very expressive events. The 5th of September, 12 months, 12 names. Yes. So thank you for that huge program. Mm-hmm. We are now at the point to ask the audience. Journalists, please. Yes, Mr.
I have one question. You answered it already before. Israel is a very successful country in development and in the IT business. Mm-hmm. Much better than the European states. And I know that it's now we have a big lack in IT, in the IT branch, also in Germany. We made it in Romania. In Romania, in Timișoara, there's zero unemployment rate. You don't get anybody there for IT development, software development. How are there already programs to help us a little between Israel and Germany, because we need it. We are much more behind than you.
Well, first of all, we need to remember that Germany is probably the strongest economy in Europe. And I don't think we undermine or underestimate your capabilities. And you are doing, you have this richness of industry and of small, medium-sized companies that are bringing a lot of value to the German economy. But you were right. I think we have some added value that we can contribute to your industry, to your economy. And your leadership in all states of Germany, in all economic fields, recognize this and are coming actually to Israel. There's a lot of visit, a lot of exchange, looking for exactly where are they lacking and where we can be of relevance. So there is a lot of stress, but as I said earlier, I think you need part of our innovation, but we need part of your engineering experience. So the cooperation is the most important thing. I invite everyone to come to Israel and see for themselves what we can offer in terms of green tech, in terms of biotech, in terms of fintech, and many more, even smart cars, even smart mobility. We have a lot to contribute, and this is definitely something that the German company's economy needs. So there is a lot of possibilities, but I think we should be modest. Israel should be modest. This is not the main characteristic or very strong characteristic of the Israeli society. But we should be modest and appreciate that the partnership will bring both of us more value, and it's not only one way.
So thank you for that. Very modest.
One question.
At first, you ladies first. Yes, please talk. Yes, colleague. Yes.
Okay. What do you think? What provoked Russia against the war with Ukraine? What's your personal opinion?
This is something I'd rather not talk about. I think your opinion, Germany probably knows it better. As I said, our position is that it is unprovoked and totally useless war that is causing a lot of pain and damage to the Ukrainian people, to the Russian people as well, because they are going to suffer from sanctions. Some of them are fighting, and this is causing a lot of grief and pain to their own families. And I hope there will be a solution to this war in the very, very near future.
Thank you. So we have a microphone in the audience. Peter Althammer, a member of our club, on over there, so we can understand. Yes.
I try my very best. Ms. Shamir, as a diplomat from Israel, Munich is a special place to live and to work there. You mentioned the terror attack on the Olympic Games, but we all think about, this is the city where Adolf Hitler started his political career. This is the city of the so-called Reichskristallnacht, and so on and so on. So I'd like to ask you, what are your impressions now? You're quite new here in Munich. What are your first impressions? And if I may, what are your personal feelings to work here in this city?
Clearly, as you said, symbolic present, emotional presence. I don't know if you know, but the consulate is located in the quarter of the Nazi regime. So I think it's a symbolic victory of the Jewish people that we are right there in the middle, where Hitler or the Nazi regime wanted to build their own, to establish this regime and a murderous regime. But we are there now, so we won. We won. The beautiful thing is that in this quarters of the Nazi regime, where actually Hitler's office was, there is a music school these days. So what comes out of it is music. Young people that are creating, that are studying there, and from my window I can actually hear them sing. So the whole atmosphere, again, a very symbolic thing. I come here not to be affected or remembering the war. Of course I remember. Of course we remember the Nazi history of the city, but now we look forward, and now what we hear is a lot of optimistic or a beautiful vision of both, first of all, a very positive future, first and foremost for Germany, but also for Germany-Israel relations. It's hard to walk the streets, and sometimes I think, I go to the Odeonplatz and I think of the big parades there, and I see the ruins that are actually left in this quarter of the Nazi regime. We cannot ignore it. We do think of it. I do think of it sometimes. But what I found in Munich now, in South Germany, and I believe my colleagues in the rest of Germany, is open doors to Israel and a lot of enthusiasm from cooperation with Israel, a lot of openness to Israeli presence. Only these days we see so many Israel days all over Germany, all over South Germany. It's really heartwarming. So although we think of the past, we also look at the future, and my responsibility as a diplomat, as representing Israel, is to look forward and make sure this will never happen again. And I'm sure the German society will not allow this history to repeat itself.
So, last question, please, over there.
Just the ladies first.
Okay. Ladies first, yes.
One question to the program of offering economic enhancement. What's the position of the Israeli civil society and the NGOs to that program? Do they agree to it, or is there criticism?
For cooperation with Germany?
No, for the program you told us about offering economic improvement to Palestinian people.
I think the Israeli population also would like to see, majority of the population would like to see peace and security between Israel and the Palestinians. And there are many programs where young people can meet. They are less public, they are less in the media. I think you journalists can appreciate or can understand why usually the focus is on crisis rather than on positive processes that are being, but it is being done, and I think most of the Israelis would like to see more and more of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So please, over there.
Just a remark at first. I was last week in Israel, and I also had a meeting a lot of meetings one day in Silicon Valley. So it's an amazing spot for IT and also for the startup scene. Mm-hmm. So there must be for us, especially Germany, also for Europe, to get workshop together, because it was phenomenal. The other question for me is to you, in the end, and you mentioned before, I think, no state can be secure, and also Israel, if the neighbors are not really fit in energy with basics, water, energy, and especially in our days. I think Tony Blair was founded the quartet in 2015 to get a harmonized energy world around Israel and the other countries, and especially supported by, I think, the UAE and also Saudi Arabia.
What was established? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Tony Blair established the quartet.
The quartet?
Yeah.
I think before that even, yeah.
Yeah, and do you know how is the process in this right now? Or will it be a success? Because there is work between Saudi Arabia, UAE, and also with Israel and the Palestinians.
I think the initiative of the quartet was part of the attempt to bring peace between mainly Israeli and Palestinians with the support of Europe, but I think they haven't been working or being very active for quite a few years now. So I cannot say that they are present in the process. Sadly, maybe we do need to bring them back to the table and encourage more activity on their part. Hopefully they will bring more advancement or positive developments to our region.
Okay.
Fine. 60 minutes are over. The bells at Munich capital are ringing. And I learned so much about Israel. Thank you for that. And it's your issue too, I thought.
Yes, from the Association of European Journalists, it was a great pleasure to meet you, and you saw the reaction of the colleagues. It was a very interesting discussion, and thank you for that.
Thank you again for having me here, for having this very interesting and stimulating talk, because it made me think about a lot of things that some of us are taking for granted. Very stimulating and interesting talk.
And so we are in contact, and if you need a little link to the press, then call us.
I will.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So bye-bye.